The night was tempestuous, the rain relentless against the windows. In the outskirts of Chicago, within the aged, towering apartment building known as the Ridgewood, on its 10th floor, a group of young adults prepared to engage in an unsettling game. A game known in urban legends as the elevator game, rumored to transport players to another realm. Amelia, her eyes always alight with a hidden curiosity, recited the rules. First, enter the elevator on the first floor. Then, press the buttons for the 4th, 2nd, 6th, 2nd, 10th, and finally, the 5th floor. If everything goes correctly, a mysterious woman will enter the elevator on the 5th floor. You must avoid her and press the 1st floor button. If the elevator ascends to the 10th floor, you've succeeded. You've crossed over. A tense excitement filled the room. Daniel, the group's more timid member, voiced his apprehension. "Is this even real? I'm getting a bad feeling about this." "Don't be ridiculous," Amelia scoffed, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "It's just a game, Daniel. Besides, we're not children." However, Chloe, whose gaze always seemed to be searching for something unseen, cautioned, "I don't think we should do this. These stories don't spread for no reason." But Amelia and their friend Jake were already captivated by the thrill. They decided tonight they would play the elevator game. Despite Daniel and Chloe's pleas, they couldn't be dissuaded. The clock struck 2. Outside, the howling wind and drumming rain amplified the eerie atmosphere. Amelia, Jake, and Daniel stood before the elevator doors. Chloe, reluctant, was coaxed into joining them. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a silent, dim interior. Amelia stepped in first, followed by Jake, Daniel, and Chloe. Amelia pressed the 1st floor button, and then one by one, the prescribed sequence. The elevator seemed to descend into an unnerving stillness, a prelude to something unknown. 4th floor, 2nd floor, 6th floor, back to 2nd, then the 10th. The elevator was a tomb of hushed anticipation. The thumping of their hearts grew louder with each passing floor. On the 5th floor, the doors opened. A mysterious woman entered, her face obscured in the shadows. She wore a long, dark dress. A chilling draft swept through the elevator, as if an unseen presence was watching them. Daniel was on the verge of panic. Amelia, forcing herself to be brave, pressed the 1st floor button. The elevator shuddered, then began to move. But instead of descending, it ascended. Towards the 10th floor. A wave of dread washed over them. Had they indeed crossed over? The elevator ascended, a silent metal coffin carrying their fears. The digital numbers above the door flickered, each one a countdown to an unknown fate. Chloe gripped Daniel's arm, her knuckles white. Jake, usually the bravest of the group, was now pale, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. Amelia, though trying to maintain a facade of composure, felt a cold dread seeping into her bones. The doors slid open on the 10th floor. The hallway was eerily dim, the usual fluorescent lights replaced by a faint red glow that cast long, distorted shadows. A silence, thick and heavy, pressed down on them, a silence that seemed to swallow all sound. "This isn't right," Daniel whispered, his voice trembling. "This isn't how it's supposed to be." Amelia, trying to ignore the growing panic, stepped out of the elevator. "It's just a different atmosphere," she said, her voice strained. "Maybe it's part of the game." But even she didn't believe her own words. The air felt wrong, charged with an unseen energy. The walls seemed to breathe, the shadows to move. They ventured down the hallway, their footsteps echoing unnaturally in the oppressive silence. Each room they passed was dark, empty, the doors slightly ajar, as if waiting. A sense of being watched, of being hunted, grew stronger with every step. Suddenly, a faint sound reached them, a soft, rhythmic tapping. It seemed to be coming from the end of the hallway. They exchanged nervous glances. "What is that?" Chloe asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jake, despite his fear, took the lead, his footsteps slow and deliberate. They reached the end of the hallway. The tapping was louder now, a steady, unsettling beat. A door at the end of the hallway was slightly open. They peered inside. The room was almost completely dark, the only light coming from a flickering red lamp in the corner. In the center of the room, a figure sat, its back to them. The tapping sound was coming from its hands, which moved rhythmically against a dark surface. "Hello?" Amelia called out, her voice trembling. The figure stopped moving. It slowly turned around. In the dim red light, they could make out a pale face, eyes wide and empty. It was the woman from the elevator. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice a low, raspy wispy. You've crossed over. Now you belong here." A wave of terror washed over them. They turned to run, but the door behind them slammed shut. They were trapped. Trapped! The group huddled together, their breaths shallow and rapid. The woman from the elevator, her eyes like hollow pits, began to move towards them, her footsteps slow and deliberate. The rhythmic tapping, now a low, unsettling drumbeat, echoed through the room. "What do you want?" Daniel stammered, his voice barely audible. The woman didn't answer. She simply continued to approach, her gaze fixed on them. A sense of overwhelming dread filled the room, a feeling of being caught in a nightmare. Jake, trying to regain his composure, stepped forward. "We just want to leave," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "We didn't mean to come here." The woman stopped, her head tilting slightly. "Leave?" she whispered, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "You cannot leave. Not now." Suddenly, the red lamp in the corner flickered and died, plunging the room into near darkness. Only a faint crimson glow remained, casting grotesque shadows that danced on the walls. The tapping sound intensified, becoming a frantic, maddening rhythm. Chloe, her eyes wide with terror, screamed, "We have to get out of here!" She lunged towards the door, but it remained locked, unyielding. The woman, her form now a dark silhouette in the dim light, began to laugh, a low, chilling sound that seemed to vibrate through the room. "You are mine now," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "You belong to this place." Amelia, her mind racing, remembered the rules of the game. To return, they had to reverse the sequence of the elevator buttons. But how could they get back to the elevator? "The elevator," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "We need to get back to the elevator." But the hallway was now a maze of shadows, the dim red glow casting an eerie, disorienting light. The tapping sound grew louder, closer, as the woman moved towards them, her form shifting and distorting in the darkness. They ran, their footsteps echoing through the silent hallway. The woman's laughter followed them, a chilling, mocking sound that seemed to come from all directions. They reached the elevator, its doors still open, a beacon of hope in the darkness. But the woman was close, her form a dark, looming shadow behind them. "You can't escape," she hissed, her voice a rasping whisper. "This place will keep you." Just as the woman reached them, Amelia lunged forward, pressing the 10th floor button. The elevator doors slammed shut, cutting off the woman's outstretched hand. The elevator began to descend, the tapping sound fading into a distance. They were leaving, but they knew, with a chilling certainty, that they were not leaving unscathed. The elevator descended, a cold metallic sanctuary amidst the terror they had just experienced. The digital numbers above the door counted down, each one a step closer to the familiar reality they desperately craved. Yet the air within the elevator remained thick with a lingering dread, the echo of the woman's chilling laughter still ringing in their ears. Are we safe now?" Daniel whispered, his voice trembling. Amelia, her face pale and drawn, shook her head. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely audible. "I don't think we're ever going to be safe again." The elevator doors opened on the first floor. The lobby, usually bustling with activity, was now deserted, the fluorescent lights casting an unnatural, stark glow. The silence was unnerving, a stark contrast to the cacophony of fear they had just endured. They stepped out, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. A sense of unease settled over them, a feeling that they were being watched, followed. "We need to get out of here," Chloe said, her voice urgent. "We need to go home." They rushed out of the building, the cool night air a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the 10th floor. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a damp, misty atmosphere. The city lights, usually a comforting beacon, now seemed cold and distant. As they walked, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound seemed to carry a hidden meaning. They kept glancing over their shoulders, expecting to see the woman from the elevator, her pale face and empty eyes lurking in the darkness. When they finally reached Amelia's apartment, they collapsed onto the couches, exhausted and terrified. The night had taken its toll, leaving them shaken and vulnerable. "What was that place?" Jake asked, his voice hoarse. "What did we see?" No one had an answer. They had ventured into the unknown, and the unknown had left its mark on them. As the night wore on, they tried to make sense of what had happened. They replayed the events in their minds, searching for a logical explanation, but there was none. They had crossed a line, entered a realm beyond their understanding. The next morning, they woke up to a world that seemed both familiar and alien. The city streets, the sounds of traffic, the everyday routines, all seemed to carry a subtle, unsettling undertone. They had returned, but they had brought something back with them. Amelia noticed small, almost imperceptible changes. A flicker in the corner of her vision, a whisper in the silent room. Chloe reported strange, almost weightless, cold touches. Daniel, usually a sound sleeper, had nightmares. Jake, who tried to be the bravest, was jumpy at the slightest noise. They were haunted, not by a ghost, but by the lingering presence of the other world. They had played a game, and the game had played them. The days that followed were a slow descent into unease. Amelia, Jake, Daniel, and Chloe found their lives subtly, yet irrevocably, altered. The other world, though physically left behind, had woven itself into the fabric of their reality,